This is the morning of the 7th of August, 2024. This was published by Fox, posted on August the 7th, written by Michael Ruiz, R-U-I-Z. Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's new right-hand man, echoes left-wing crime policies. Harris's VP pick deepens concerns about Democrats' crime policy. Let's see what's in this clip, see if there's an ad there.
Invasion at our southern border. Joe Biden and Ruben Gallego's open border is devastating our communities. Violent crime, human trafficking, and illegal drugs are flooding our streets. It's a humanitarian crisis funded by cartels, but Ruben Gallego and Joe Biden are too weak to stop it, putting their radical agenda over the safety of the American people. This isn't about politics. It's about our lives. Arizona just can't trust Ruben Gallego to keep us safe.
Jason Rantz is a Seattle radio talk show host and brings us a lot of information on the ground from that city that has at times devolved as they preach defund the police. Jason, I just want to get, first of all, your initial reaction to all that we saw on the one-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder.
I think we should reflect on what we've seen for the last year, which is out of this death and out of the activism that came from the death is we've had historic crime surges, record high murder rates, destroyed communities, businesses that have been completely burned to the ground. And on one side of the aisle, they've said pretty much nothing. They pretended that this was all peaceful protests. I'm surprised yesterday they even talked about what happened at George Floyd Square. I think we have to realize that all of the damage that has been done, the police departments that have been gutted, this is damage that cannot be undone overnight. We are going to pay the price for this financially, but also in lost lives, potentially for years to come. And I don't think people realize that. Antifa has surged after this, and we've got the introduction of these new policies that basically show no consequences for criminals, getting rid of the cash bail or sentencing enhancements, drug laws not being enforced, which have led to overdoses on city streets, and then, of course, taking police out of schools. All of this has consequences, and they're not even yet fully realized, and that's the terrifying fact.
Well, and as we see those peaceful protesters out there yesterday and last night, you have to wonder going forward what the protests will be about, with more than 20 cities leaning into defund now and devolving into more crime. Let's get to this. Seattle's Inspector General is now pushing to ban police for conducting routine traffic stops. Writing in a letter to the city's interim police chief, quote, "Stopping a person is a significant infringement on civil liberty and should be reserved for instances when a person is engaged in criminal conduct that harms others. Stops for government-created requirements do not justify the risk to community or to officers." So like talking on a cell phone, which we know is hugely dangerous, that's something that was created in this way. They're not allowed to stop them. What are they trying to say here, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, or expired car tabs, old license plates, and really speeding in certain instances wouldn't qualify for what she's saying here. When you read in between the lines, and when you read some, frankly, that she put in there, she's basically forwarding an anti-police agenda. This is a narrative that cops are dangerous. She brings a point that black motorists, for example, are at an increased risk of harm when they interact with police. And all you're doing is forwarding this belief, this talking point, that whenever a cop is in front of you, that somehow you're at risk. And it's worse when you're black or when you're Latino, because all cops are racist. But when they do that, they actually not only make it more difficult for the police officer to do their jobs, but they make it harder and more dangerous for the person who's interacting with the cop, because now they're untrusting.
Jason, I will have you back very, very soon. As has happened now a couple of days in a row, conversation being perforated by a shooting, breaking news. Jason Rantz from Seattle, thank you very much.
With Minneapolis burning during riots over the death of George Floyd, he overdosed from fentanyl. You can see that clip I posted. He's got it in his mouth, and they zoomed in on it. It's a complete joke. It's an absolute complete joke. With Minneapolis burning during riots over the death of George Floyd in police custody in 2020, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz played a central role in the debate over policing and crime in the United States at the time. Anti-police protests quickly spread from Minneapolis to the rest of the country. He was criticized for dragging his feet in helping city police quell the unrest, withholding the National Guard for days. Years later, he finally called rising crime unacceptable and stepped up state support for the embattled city. Then Vice President Harris, the Democratic 2024 presidential nominee, named Walz as her running mate on Tuesday. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, a Republican vice presidential candidate and running mate for former President Trump, poked at Walz's 2020 record Tuesday, calling his addition to the Democratic ticket an interesting tag team. If we remember the rioting in the summer of 2020, Tim Walz was the guy who let rioters burn down Minneapolis. He said of the riots that began in Minnesota in response to the death of Floyd while being arrested in Minneapolis. And then Kamala Harris was the one who bailed the rioters out of jail. Look at this bald-headed asshole, huh? Guy's a joke. Rioting over Floyd's death in Minnesota soon led to fiery demonstration across the country, as well as police morale and staffing issues that continue to this day. And Walz has been criticized for allowing the chaos to fester by delaying the deployment of the National Guard. Then he got the state involved in the prosecution of Kim Potter, a white police officer involved in the death of a black man. As recently as this year, Walz was accused of interfering in another unrelated police shooting case, but he hasn't posted to X about the crime since April. Kamala had decided to lean into being the candidate of urban chaos, said Paul Monroe, a former NYPD inspector, who has been critical of the leftist police and bail policies in liberal-led cities. She's already had defunding and bail reform in her portfolio, adding Walz firms up the Dems' position as the party of burning cities and attacking cops in the name of progressive causes. Say what you want. She's not hiding what she's about. You see them burning down an auto parts store. Garbage people. He took office in January 2019, and one of his first official moves was to create a Diversity and Equity Commission. But he's made a number of criminal justice reforms over the years, including a law that lowered the number of people on probation, a Clean Slate Act, which wipes some criminal records, and a police reform law that bans chokehold and requires officers to intervene if they witness a colleague using excessive force, according to Marshall Project, a nonprofit that reports on criminal justice. On Memorial Day 2020, racial tensions came to a head when a white police officer named Derek Chauvin appeared on video kneeling on Floyd's neck. Now, he was doing what he was trained to do to try to subdue anyone, especially a large black man. And that was in the manual. His mother produced the manual which showed the procedure that he was trained to do. Floyd was black, later died, prompting repeated protests that devolved in rioting, arson, and looting. A jury found Chauvin guilty of murder. 3 other officers were also fired and put on trial for lesser charges. Chauvin's going to spend the rest of his life in an Arizona prison for following his orders. Floyd's death and related riots led to calls to defund police around the country, increase oversight and tough work conditions for officers who have remained on the job in some of the bluest cities. It was truly the epicenter of 2020 anti-police movement, said Betsy Brainerd Smith, the spokesperson for the National Police Association. The policies imposed by Governor Walz are anti-police, pro-criminal, and leaning toward Marxism in a lot of ways. Look at these savages smashing a cash register in a Target store. Absolute garbage people. State's crime statistics show spikes in 2020 and 2021 before violent crimes leveled off in 2022. The State Department of Public Safety has not yet released numbers for 2023 or later. You can finish reading the rest of the article. This guy's a piece of crap, no different than camel face on her knees. Kamala Harris is a piece of crap. And they never give us a choice. An AutoZone store burns on May 28th, 2020. Look at that. Somebody worked hard to build that business, and these trash niggas burned it to the ground. I'll attach the link. Pass it along. And thanks for listening.